The BBC has issued an apology for calling Richard Tice's Reform UK a far-right party. In a statement, the corporation said this. In an article about the Liberal Democrats' spring conference, we wrongly described the political party Reform UK as far-right when referring to polling. This sentence was subsequently removed from the article as it fell short of our usual editorial standards. While the original wording was based on news agency copy, we take full responsibility and apologise for the error. It might surprise you that Reform, a party that shouts free speech at every opportunity, would be so sensitive, dare I say, offended. And given Reform's stance on immigration, culture war issues and climate change, you might also be surprised that the BBC buckled so quickly to have its language policed. On GB News, Richard Tice gave his side of the story.
There are very significant implications of calling a political party, and by implication, its leader and senior leadership team, far right. And it is that which is defamatory and libelous. That's why they've apologised immediately, and they will change their editorial guidelines. Because if they can get away with that, then all of a sudden everybody else does. They will take that as a sort of sign of credibility, and it has huge implications. That would mean, for example, we might lose our bank accounts, we might lose the ability to get a mortgage, bank loans for our businesses. All of this flows immediately from that description.
Now, first things first, I think debanking is wrong. I said that when Farage was being, I think, mistreated by the NatWest Group. You should not be debanked because of your political views. I say that as somebody who believes in freedom, and I say that as someone on the left. Today, Nigel Farage, tomorrow, me. So I can dress that up as a principled position, which I think it is, but it's also something that is very relevant to the left. Sometimes society is wrong about something, radical views come along, they change them, and the radicals who were radical, decades later, it turns out, were the ones speaking common sense. That's how we get progress. And that's why I don't think we should punish people who dissent with the prevailing views of the time. But here's the thing. If you call me far left, I don't care. Go ahead. After all, I'm clearly to the left of the Labour Party leadership, and I'm clearly to the left of many people who consider themselves centre-left. Now, personally, I view many of my opinions, like public ownership of rail, mail and water, as centre-left, and I view the people who think they're centre-left but disagree with that as actually liberals. But like I say, if you think I'm far left, so be it. I believe in free speech. I thought Richard Tice does as well, but apparently not. What is more, I doubt that the BBC apologised because the claim is libelous or defamatory. After all, truth is a complete defence against a libel suit. And an academic specialising in defamation law got in touch with The Guardian to say this. Richard Tice's assertion that labelling Reform UK far-right is defamatory, and in particular his threat to involve lawyers against those repeating the statement, has no basis in law. Under English and Welsh defamation law, political parties have no standing to bring claims for libel or slander. Labelling particular individuals as far-right can, by contrast, give rise to actionable defamation claims in principle. However, if they have themselves made statements publicly that might be interpreted as far-right, they have essentially brought that view upon themselves, and therefore the statement they are now complaining about has not caused them, quote, serious harm within the meaning of Section 1 of the Defamation Act 2013. And if Tice really does think that using the term far-right is libelous, maybe he'd better have a word with his only MP, recent Tory defector Lee Anderson. In February last year, he wrote this about Labour MP Kim Johnson. Shocking and disgusting comments. The far left of Labour making vile comments in the chamber today. These people want to govern our country. We must fight this every step of the way. So Reform UK isn't far right, and if you say that in the media, you're going to get a lawyer's letter. But Keir Starmer's Labour Party is far left. Really? Mike, what is good for the goose is good for the gander. Why are Reform so triggered about being called far right when their only MP thinks that the Labour Party is on the far left?
I think they're triggered because they know that labels matter, and being framed as a far-right party does in some ways delegitimise them and frames them in extremist actors. Now, I think it's really important we frame Reform UK as a far right party rather than a populist party, because what often happens is these parties that espouse this really far right rhetoric are being framed in the media as populist. And what this does is it suggests that they're talking for the people. And what it suggests is that they're talking for some kind of democratic demands that people have, these legitimate concerns that people have. So it's important to label them as what they are. And in most academic circles, as someone who's an academic, the far right, and Reform UK, the Reform UK share many parallels to a kind of traditional far right party. So think about one of their kind of hallmark policies. And one of the things that, if you think about Reform UK, you think about this particular thing, mass immigration. Now, what most far right parties say is their nation, whether it's France or the UK, whichever nation the far right party is from, they say that mass immigration represents an existential threat. Now, what Reform UK do is they suggest the same thing, right? And they've spoken a lot about Islam being a threat to the UK, Muslims being a threat to the UK. Lee Anderson, in his speech he gave when he became a Reform UK MP, I urge our viewers to listen back to that speech and urge whoever's listening to this as a podcast, listen back to what Lee Anderson says. It is, and I played it to some of my students last week, it is very Powell, Enoch Powell. Some of the things he says about we need to get our country back. People are coming here, essentially an alien culture is what he's suggesting. These people who are coming here aren't integrating. This is all far right rhetoric. This is all the rhetoric we heard from Enoch Powell in the 1960s. So the fact they're being labelled as a far right party isn't just because people want to label them as such. It's because they are a far right party. And I think it's important to use that framing rather than what often happens is they're a populist party. They are not a populist party. This is a far right party, and it's important that labels attached to them no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, Richard Tice labels Reform UK. Reform UK labels itself, rather, as we examined a moment ago. It's important to delimit political parties from people. It's literally impossible to slander a political party as far right, or to libel a political party as far right. They say that they're net zero on migration, and they want a complete end to any immigration unless it's for essential migrant workers. And I don't quite, I mean, look, essential migrant workers is a very tenuous term. It could be 20,000 a year, it could be 320,000 a year. Essential is a very strange term. What it means is, though, what's not essential is that if you're a British person, you fall in love with somebody from overseas, is it essential that that person is able to live here with you and you can make a life together? Not really. So they oppose that. And that's a lot of people, by the way. It happens a lot. The Tories are bringing the cap in terms of you have to earn a certain amount to be able to have a spouse over here in the UK. I think in January 2025, that's going up to £38,500 a year. If you earn less than that, you're simply not allowed to fall in love with somebody from abroad and make a life in the UK. There's a cost on that. Reform UK will go further. They'd ban that altogether. They'd stop it altogether. I don't see how that's not a far-right policy. You might agree with that policy, but it's a far-right policy. There might be some people watching or listening and go, well, I think that's a good policy. It's a far-right policy. It's to the right of any centre-right political party in Europe or North America. So, I think on the one hand, it's very strange for them to repeatedly attack the Conservative Party as liberals, a liberal party, and yet they get upset when they are labelled as a far-right party. If you're to the right of the Conservatives and Labour's on the far left, I mean, where do you think you are? This is kind of basic positioning. But look, I won't denigrate Mr. Tice. I'll respectfully disagree. I don't want to get a lawyer's letter. Although on this count, I don't think that would have gone very far. That just seems like essentially an act of very low-level intimidation of the media. Because like you say, I think really that label of far right hurts. So of course you adopt far right policies and far right rhetoric, but then you say, look, we're centrists, we're liberals. Even though the centre of this country wants public ownership of things like rail, mail and water. And Reform UK certainly do not.